For over 1,000 years, Rome ruled the known world. I mean, its armies conquered nations, its roads literally connected continents, and its emperors shaped civilization itself. We are talking about an empire that defined the absolute foundations of modern human society. But then, right in 476 AD, the Roman Empire fell. It just collapsed under the crushing weight of political instability, economic ruin, and all those outside invasions. Or at least, well, that's the history we know. Because tonight, in this explainer, we're going to enter an alternate timeline, a reality where Rome never actually collapsed.
Okay, let's dive into this. In our reality, Rome obviously met a pretty bitter end, right? Total political collapse, endless civil wars, complete fragmentation. But imagine the alternative. Imagine a divergence point where strong emperors actually managed to step up, reform that systemic corruption, and completely stop the civil wars dead in their tracks. With that kind of internal stability finally locked in, their military and technology suddenly get the breathing room they need to evolve. So instead of crumbling to dust, Rome stabilizes.
And you know, a stabilized Rome doesn't just sit there playing it safe. It expands relentlessly. Just 100 years after our divergence point, all of Europe is conquered. 200 years later, the entirety of North Africa is locked down and secured. By the 300-year mark, the Middle East is annexed. And if we fast forward 400 years, Latin officially becomes the global language. Think about that. Roman law doesn't just govern the Mediterranean anymore. It literally dominates the entire planet. Which brings us to our next era, the Industrial Roman Age. So I want you to picture this. Ancient Roman aesthetics. We're talking sweeping marble columns and flowing togas, but combined with absolutely explosive technological growth. Because without the messy interruption of the Dark Ages, early steam engines start emerging to power the massive machinery of the empire. Those famous Roman aqueducts, they aren't just trickling water into local towns anymore. We're looking at highly advanced mechanized systems spanning entire continents. And thanks to this mind-blowing level of engineering, giant megacities rise up all across the globe, absolutely dwarfing anything built in our own timeline. Now, this creates a seriously mind-bending geopolitical reality, because with unending expansion, you don't have separate countries anymore. The Earth is just one massive Roman civilization. Really think about what that means for a second. There are no world wars, simply because there are no competing superpowers left to fight them. There's no independent Europe. There's literally no America as we know it today. No borders, just the eternal empire. But, as you might guess, an endless empire isn't exactly a utopia. Let's look at the price of eternity. You see, an empire that never dies creates some incredibly deep, systemic problems for humanity. Sure, the promise sounded beautiful on paper, a completely unified world, zero global wars, ultimate stability. But the dark reality? It's the total loss of freedom. As the empire grows, rebellion naturally simmers under the surface, which forces state surveillance to ramp up to absolutely unprecedented levels. The emperors aren't just politicians anymore. They become these untouchable, godlike rulers. Humanity isn't just being governed. It is entirely controlled. Now, what's really interesting is what happens when we jump ahead to the modern Roman future. Because this is where 2 millennia of pure Roman rule ultimately leads. We are definitely not looking at soldiers with iron swords anymore. Instead, imagine futuristic legionaries fully equipped with advanced energy weapons. The Colosseum? Yeah, it still stands, but the entertainment has evolved into these brutal, neon-lit battles between cybernetic gladiators. You've got massive floating temples and administrative hubs literally dominating the skies. And at the absolute top of this whole system, the biological emperors have actually been replaced by artificial intelligence. It's a completely high-tech cybernetic civilization inspired entirely by the brutality of ancient Rome. All of this really forces us to pause and ask a profoundly deep question. Was Rome's fall actually necessary? Seriously, when we look at this high-tech, oppressive, completely borderless world, we kind of have to wonder, was the collapse of the Roman Empire in our timeline just a tragic historical event, or was it a vital, absolutely necessary step for human progress? It brings to mind this thought. Maybe civilizations must die so new worlds can be born. Perhaps human evolution and the eventual birth of free, independent nations literally required the collapse of the ancient world's greatest superpower. Rome once boldly called itself the Eternal Empire. And, in this alternate reality, perhaps it truly was eternal.
but it came at a terrible, terrible cost.
If you want to explore more alternate histories, forgotten timelines, and impossible civilizations, just like the one we covered today, make sure you subscribe to Alternate Itihas. Because as we've seen in this explainer, history may not be as fixed as we think.